The Big Ten is now nearly big enough to be called the Big Ten times two. Are they done yet, or are there still more dominoes to fall in realignment?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and joining me for the first time today is our guy, Craig Sheeman, the new host of the Big Locked On Big Ten podcast. So great to have you, Craig. You're about a month into this thing, right? How are things rolling over at Locked On Big Ten?
Yeah, Isaac, everything's pretty good. We started the first day of summer, June 21st, and we're just rolling through, and there has been no shortage of Big Ten news lately, so it's been pretty good, I have to admit.
There's been Big Ten news. I have no idea what you're talking about. No, that's great. It seems like it's always nice when there's so much content right as you get going. I saw one of your realignment videos the other day got like 15,000 views, so that's great, man. It's always nice that people are diving right in to see it. And Craig, let's get right on into this thing. The Big Ten, we already knew that USC and UCLA were going to come in. That's been going for a while, and we knew this moved to 16. But then last Friday, we find out that we're also adding some schools from up in the Pacific Northwest, and Washington and Oregon are coming over as well. I just want to start by getting your thoughts on this whole crazy ball of wax.
It's a lot to wrap your mind around. It's no doubt. I think last year, if they wanted to, they could have done the four schools at the time with Southern Cal and UCLA, and then had Washington and Oregon come with them, because we learned this past couple of weeks that those two schools were already vetted. And Kevin Warren, the prior commissioner, he was really big, at least publicly, on saying, well, we didn't want to be the bad guys to destroy a conference in the Pac-12. I said, well, you took the two crown jewels in Southern Cal and UCLA. So I did tap the brakes on Oregon and Washington for a while. And I think it was very telling this year when they only took Washington and Oregon and said no thank you to Cal and Stanford. I think the school presidents wanted it. They like the idea of having a couple more academic schools, but believe me, this is not about academics. Nobody cares about that. This is about money and TV contracts and big time matchups. So, and I also think they did that for a reason, because I do think they're going to 20. I think some people think it's going to be as high as 24, but I think 20 for sure. And they wanted to keep some real estate open, because I don't think they want ever to have Cal and Stanford. I think now they want to look to the ACC. In fact, my latest posting podcast is on that. And you saw last week how Florida State was making some noise. I think they speak for Clemson and the others with that horrible TV deal they're in for the next 13 years. And I think they look at the landscape and they say, wow, we're Florida State. And Clemson's got to be saying, well, we're Clemson. We're a football powerhouse. And they're looking at Indiana and Northwestern and those schools. And those schools are making $30 million a year more. And over the next 13 years, those schools are going to make $400 million more. And they're like, we got to do something about it. But unfortunately, everything I've heard, that ACC grant of rights deal is pretty airtight. I don't know how they're going to break it, but I have a feeling at some point they're going to break it.
Yeah, it just seems like when they start looking at all the money that's there, I know it's a shot in the pants at the beginning, but you think of over time, as you just said, how that money would accumulate, and it's got to be worth it at the end of the day. So, man, Craig, we got to get a mountain time zone team in here, though, because we've got the Eastern time zone, the Central, and the Pacific. To be truly coast to coast, we got to go somewhere into the mountain states. But you talked there about Kevin Warren's leadership, and that's something that I've wondered. Like, clearly new Big 12 commissioner Brett Yormark's like, I don't mind. I'll be the bad guy. Let's go steal everyone. Let's go burn the whole thing down. Do you think that's what new commissioner Kevin Petitti's kind of mindset is we got to do what we got to do to keep the Big Ten right at the top of the heap with the SEC?
I think so. And I think he's buttoning up a few things. There was he's been on the job 100 days. And what a first 100 days. You guys should
commiserate.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I hear there were a few details not buttoned up with the previous TV contract. So he's had to kind of finish that up. Then he had to make the new schedule for 24 and 25 for football. And believe me, everybody loved it. It was all nice and neat. We saw the great matchups with Southern Cal and UCLA, and some new rivalries, some old ones from previous Rose Bowl matchups.
Yeah.
And it all worked out. They were going to get rid of the divisions. and everything was great. And now we got to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to add Washington and Oregon to the schedule. And I tell you, after this year, they're getting rid of divisions because it's unfair to schools like my alma mater, Indiana. You've got to play Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan every single year. Meanwhile, Purdue, they get Iowa and Wisconsin are their toughest games every year. Not every year. I don't want to get anybody mad at me.
Sure.
It's a much tougher road in one division versus another. But I think as soon as they get rid of the division, I think they're going to have to consider bringing them back. We truly are a western half of the United States and eastern half of the United States when you look at the teams in the Big Ten. So I wouldn't be surprised if they bring the divisions back.
Let's just get the leaders and legends, man. That was class.
I can never keep them straight in my head, and I'm a Big Ten guy.
Hey, well, that makes me feel a lot better. I had like a cheat sheet on my arm every day or something like that.
Yeah, I like East-West. It's very simple to remember.
Leaders and legends, man. It just has a ring to it. No, so I mean, Craig, with this coast-to-coast nature of things, I mean, I was talking about it the other day with the Big 12 as you can tip off, since we're talking college basketball, you could tip off at noon Eastern on a Saturday and have games in literally every window through to the last tip of the night, like midnight Eastern as everyone's going to bed on the East Coast. And all of those are teams in your conference. What does that do for Kevin Petiti as he comes into this role?
I think it helps. I mean, it's another avenue for money. And we always joke about now we got something other than Hawaii to catch up on our gambling debts throughout the day, late at night. So watch some more West Coast football and basketball.
That's incredible. I love it. Well, just logistically, is this going to be doable? 18 teams across the nation?
Well, I've heard a couple of things, and I think it's easier to do in basketball because, look, if Southern Cal's got to take on Rutgers and Maryland back to back, and I would hope they don't do that to them, but maybe they do. Maybe you can basketball, you can play 2 games in 3 days. Football, you can't. So if you have UCLA playing Rutgers and Maryland back to back weeks on the road, are they going to stay out east? Are they going to do their classes if we want to still concern ourselves with the academia? Are they going to do them on Zoom call? Probably won't make them play like that and stay out east. But I've heard other things that, and I haven't backed this up, but I heard some people talking about like there may be like Indianapolis, maybe a hub, so that teams can fly in. And Indianapolis built a humongous hotel right next to Lucas Oil Stadium for the Super Bowl a few years ago. Maybe that's like a Big Ten hub where teams can travel and hang out for a while and then shoot off and do regional games. That could be their home base instead of flying all the way back to the West Coast. It's an interesting idea. It's thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, and it worked for the NCAA tournament the year after, that bubble situation, and everyone was in the Indianapolis greater metro area. And it's clearly a good hub of it. The problem is then you got to watch out for the NCAA sneaking up your back while you're there. So we'll see what happens with all that. Now, we do want to talk more about this Big Ten expansion. As Craig said earlier, are we done? Are we still going? Who are some of those candidates that the conference can look at going forward? We're going to get into all of that in just a second. But first, this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part has to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure the part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop eBay Motors. Plus, with over 122 million parts to choose from, you're going to be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts with the right fit at the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Craig, you got to look out for those exclusions, man. They'll get you every time. So, seriously, you talked about, it seems like the conference, while it's going to be at 18 moving forward in 24-25, The goal is looking like it's going to be to move to 20, maybe even 24, as you said there. You mentioned Clemson and Florida State. Do you foresee those right now as the main two candidates to poach?
I think so. And again, it depends if they can get out of those contracts that they're already in. I think Florida State, and again, these moves are football centric because that's where the money is. If they can't get a Florida State and a Clemson, I've heard talk of Virginia. I know you're close to North Carolina. I would love to have North Carolina in the Big Ten for basketball. That would be fantastic. Actually, I'd be curious about your thoughts on that because Florida State's the only one really making noise now. Anybody in the Tar Heels office making any noise about this as well? Or are they keeping quiet?
Very much so. No, I mean the thing is, geographically, North Carolina sits more in SEC country, but what is geography anymore? From an academic profile standpoint, North Carolina fits much better in the Big Ten than the SEC, and also from a varsity sports program standpoint, the SEC just simply doesn't support a lot of the varsity programs that North Carolina has. They're a school similar to Pac-12 schools or Big Ten schools that have a broader variety of varsity sports. And so actually, to me, they profile much better as a Big Ten university than SEC.
Yeah, you might be right. Because again, does Florida State want to go to the SEC instead of the Big Ten? Same thing with Clemson. Maybe they don't want to go to the SEC. Maybe Florida doesn't want Florida State in their same conference. I don't know. Maybe they won't have any say about it. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. And I tell you what, when Florida State came out and said, we are going to put together an exit strategy in the next 12 months. And by the way, that was the school president. That wasn't just some overzealous booster.
Blowhard. Yeah, no, it's the president.
Yeah. Look, the USC UCLA thing happened July 1 last year. The Oregon Washington thing happened the 1st of August this year. My prediction is sometime between July 1 and August 1st of next year, there will be some sort of announcement of some schools leaving the ACC for the Big Ten. Don't know which ones for sure, but like I said, probably the ones we were just talking about.
That would make a ton of sense. Yeah. And I mean, we've, as we're sitting here, this show is airing on August 11th. We've only got 4 days left in the window for this year. And so I'm with you. I don't see any more news happening this year. And even Cal and Stanford, it sounds like on Wednesday night, kind of discussions stalled on the ACC side of things with the Bay Area schools there. And so, I'm not expecting any more movement. Craig, is your anticipation, if there are more schools that come to the Big Ten, that they're going to be from other Power 5 conferences, or are there other schools outside of that structure, maybe some group of 5 teams that the Big Ten would look to add?
I don't think they would do a group of 5. I really don't. It's a good question, though. But, that's how the Big 12 survived. They knew the writing was on the wall that Texas and Oklahoma were going to leave, and they've been kind of filling in with other schools. That's where the Pac-10 failed, or Pac-12 failed. A couple of years ago, they took a stab at Texas and Oklahoma, and they couldn't close the deal. A lot of it was because of the complications of the Longhorn Network, I think. But had the Pac-12 been adding schools here and there like the Big 12 was, I think they might have been able to survive. In fact, didn't you, 3-4 years ago, think the Big 12 was the most vulnerable conference?
Oh, honestly, yes, 100%. Yeah. In fact, earlier this week, I had a show with our Locked On Big 12 host, Drake Toll, and just said, listen, this time a year ago, I thought the Big 12 was dead to rights, and that the Pac-12 was going to be the one to survive. But then, as you referenced, they brought in those 4 AAC schools starting this year, and then went out and also, as we know now, got those 4 Pac-12 schools as well. So, yes, 100%. That's where I was at.
Yeah. And I'm trying to do the math. I'm just trying to think if maybe Mountain West picks up Washington State and Oregon State. Maybe Cal and Stanford do go to the ACC. Maybe is the ACC growing, or is the ACC going to get blown up because schools are leaving? That's the big question. And then when you try to play the dominoes game and where everybody shows up. But it's all a math problem at that point. How many do we, we're going to have our super conferences, 2 or 3 of them, 50, 60 teams, whatever it is. But who goes where? Those final slots are going to be some valuable real estate for sure.
Craig, you talked a little bit ago about the divisions and the possibility of going right back to it after abandoning them. How do you see that playing out? I mean, we've got the 4 West Coast teams. Do you with having 9 right now, do you just take 5 of the other westernmost Big 10 teams and lump them in with those? What would you do with that?
Yeah, I was playing with that the other day, and with the 18 teams, you got 9-9, and it came down to everybody west. Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, they go west. Kind of draw a line down the middle of Illinois, and then I think you flip a coin between Northwestern and Illinois, who goes east and who goes west. But other than that, it's pretty tidy geographically if you want to go east versus west again.
Yeah. Hey, that's easier. And like you said, that's much, much cleaner than leaders and legends because you know how to talk about it, man.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oh, crazy stuff. Well, listen, folks, it's been to do all this speculative talk, but we can't get out of here with having some basketball talk looking ahead to the upcoming season. That's why we're here. So we're going to have one more conversation to figure out, hey, is there anyone that's going to be able to dethrone Zach Edey in Purdue this year? And Craig, can we finally end that title drought that's been plaguing the Big Ten since 2000 in Michigan State? We're going to have that conversation in just a second. All right, we are joined on Locked On College Basketball today by the new host of Locked On Big Ten, Mr. Craig Sheeman. Craig's been going at it since late June, rolling right along. Make sure you go check out that great program. But Craig, let's just look ahead. I know we're not going to get down into the weeds and the nitty gritty today on a season preview for the Big Ten, but as we sit here in early August, about 3 months out from tip off of the season, I just want to have a conversation about where you foresee the conference going this year. So my first question is this: as I look at it, I think Purdue and Michigan State are right at the top of the heap this season. Do you see Michigan State as being a legitimate challenger to knocking off Purdue?
Absolutely. And this is great because we've been so football centric leading up to the season. It's great to knock off some rust and talk some basketball.
Yes, sir.
For sure.
Yes, sir.
Purdue and Matt Painter. I think Matt Painter is a great football, or basketball coach. I went to Indiana. I grew up in Indiana, and I love the rivalry with Bob Knight and Gene Katie.
Yes,
and
the comb over, baby, the comb over.
That's right. You try to not like those guys, but I got nothing but respect for Matt Painter. I think he's a heck of a basketball coach. He absolutely has to make some more inroads in March. I mean, the Fairleigh Dickinson thing was the greatest disappointment in Big Ten history, probably. But they get all 5 starters back now that Zach Edey comes back. And again, as an opponent, you got to be shaking your heads like, what do we got to do to get rid of this guy? He's so dominating. But, the Big Ten, the NBA doesn't take big guys anymore. And I'm like, Zach Edey's 7'4" and he can play. It's unbelievable. He's unstoppable. So him coming back, that definitely puts Purdue in the driver's seat to go ahead and win the Big Ten. You mentioned Michigan State, and I think you're wise to do so because I was looking back at them the other day. I think they've got 2 players that tested the NBA waters, so they're really good, decided to come back. They got 2 other guys that decided to take advantage of their extra COVID year, so they're coming back. And then, let's just sprinkle in not 1, not 2, but 3 5-star recruits. I mean, Izzo's getting it done, man. And that team is going to be fun to watch. And he's going to coach them up and get them rolling. I don't know how they're going to be on day 1, but I know by March, they're all, they're all going to be playing really well.
Which is Tom Izzo's staple, by the way, getting them ready come March. I love how willing he is to schedule tough games in non-conference, get his team battle tested, knowing, hey, we might take some lumps, but by the time we get to March, the Spartans are going to be ready to roll. Now, Craig, outside of what we think is going to be that top tier, that upper echelon of the Big Ten this year, of the other currently 12, we're not up to 18 yet, but of the other 12 teams that aren't Purdue and Michigan State, is there anyone that you think could sneak in there into that top 2 spot?
Yeah, and first I would go back to what you talked about, mentioning the playing the schedule in tough schools early in the season. I think that's imperative. I think the good coaches do that. I know you follow the Tar Heels. I believe you have both Kansas and Kentucky this year. I think that's smart. I really do. So the coaches that aren't afraid to play anybody, I have a lot of respect for that. I think that's what you should do to get yourself ready for the Big Ten and the gauntlet, and then you'll have some success in March. I don't want to go. Well, I don't want to tout the old alma mater, but I am intrigued by them. They obviously have two massive losses in Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood Shafino, but their backcourt is as good as anybody. They get Xavier Johnson back. He's like on his 10th year now. Trey Galloway was the most efficient three-point shooter in the Big Ten. He comes back. Malik Renew, who came in as a freshman, as a high school teammate of Jalen Hood Shafino out at the academy, he was good and strong, but he had a little bit of baby fat on him. I just saw, yes, that's gone. That dude is shredded right now. He is ready to go. They get Khalil Ware, the 7-foot transfer out of Oregon. Little did he know he'd be staying in the Big Ten, huh? And Mackenzie Mbako, I was kind of holding my breath because I thought he was going to Kansas. It was between Kansas and Indiana, and he chose Indiana. He probably looked at Kansas's roster and says, as good as I am, that's a ridiculous roster. There's no way I'm cracking that for playing time with Bill Self. So he goes to Indiana. I don't know how deep the Hoosiers are, but I am intrigued by those 5 guys this year. And Mike Woodson is rapidly changed things there. He worked the portal pretty hard. And I'm intrigued by that. Now they did beat Purdue twice last year. I'll just throw that out there. They do have the magic form. They're the one team that can figure out how to slow down them, and Fairleigh Dickinson can slow down Purdue and Zach Edey. But other than that, I don't know. I think your top 2 are probably Purdue and Michigan State, if I'm going to be honest about it.
Yeah. I love the point that you got to there, is that Indiana, kind of similar. I'm at the same spot with Texas this year, going down to the Big 12. That starting crew, man, I'm really excited about. But what happens with foul trouble or injuries or other things? Can Mike Woodson build some depth beyond those guys? Speaking of Mike Woodson, I'm obviously you have your finger on the pulse of Bloomington, Indiana. What is the general consensus about the job Mike Woodson's doing?
Absolutely phenomenal. Love it. And it was a good hire from the get-go because, he's a Bob Knight guy, played for him. And I think that was missing a little bit. And you all saw 3 years ago when Bob Knight finally came back after being mad at the university, one of the greater moments in sports.
Yeah.
And on top of that, guys like him because he's got the NBA experience. So he's a longtime NBA coach. He can get into living rooms. And then I tell you what, when Jalen Hood Shafino was a one and done, that actually helped us with recruiting quite a bit, because now you can point to it like, yeah, you got a Trace Jackson Davis is going to be there for 5 years, but look, he's cool with one and dones and he can get you to the NBA. And I think that's very, very attractive. And then I think he also had Carmelo Anthony, who he coached in the NBA, recruiting for him on the phone a little bit. So yeah, I think guys see Mike Woodson, and the people that live in Indiana, they see the tie to Bob Knight. They're excited about that. But the young high school kids see that this guy can get me to the NBA, and nothing but good things are said about Mike Woodson at Indiana.
Man, that's great to hear. And also, all the Syracuse fans are screaming, why isn't Carmelo on the phone for us right now? Getting frustrated about that. I'm also really curious to see Northwestern gets back Boo Buie. Can they make it back to the tournament for a second straight year and just the third time ever? Really interesting stuff there. Illinois gets several players back. In fact, they're going to be playing FAU in the Jimmy V Classic. So some really good opportunities. Craig, I got to get us out on this. The big elephant in the room with the Big Ten is that over 2 decade long NCAA title drought at this point, going back to Michigan State in 2000, and almost the cruel irony of being a conference to go poach a bunch of Pac-12 schools is that the Pac-12's title drought is actually longer. It goes back to 1997 and Arizona. Are we going to finally break it this year, or in a hilarious twist of fate, might it be like one of the Pac-12 schools that comes in and ends the streak, the drought in a couple years here? Can this be the year? Are we going to see a Big Ten national champion?
I hope so. Many, many years ago when I was working in Los Angeles, everybody out there is like, oh, UCLA is the greatest thing ever. And I'd come out there and I'd pump my chest with a little Indiana talk here and there because of the great tradition and 5 national championships. And somebody looked me in the eye and says, dude, You haven't won anything in 20 years. What are you talking about? 1987 and Keith Smart was a long time ago. And now it's more than 20 years. It has continued. So I've kind of backed off that braggadocious part. But the same thing's happening to the whole conference. We got to put one up here. And the good and the bad of it is, I think out of a 68 team field, I literally think 32 of the teams can win it. Don't you? That used to not be the case.
Yeah.
And so if that includes Big Ten team, great. But it also means there are other teams that can knock you off at any given time. So I just, I get tired of hearing about parity, but I think it's really true. I mean, there's a lot of loaded teams and anybody can win it. So on one side, yeah, anybody, including a Big Ten team, could win it. And on the bad side, yeah, anybody other than a Big Ten team can win it, because it's college basketball is loaded right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. The parity is more alive than ever. I honestly think the transfer portal has been great for that, because guys are like, well, if I'm going to be number 11 off the bench, then I'd rather go find somewhere where I could play. Coaches aren't using as many of their scholarships anymore. And so guys will just go find a spot to play, and it's spreading the wealth around. I love to see it. I think NIL is helping with that, because any booster with deep pockets anywhere can say, hey, we'll take care of you. Come on over, even though pay for play is not supposed to be a thing.
Right.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We all know what's going on, Craig Sheeman. So That's where we're at. Craig, it's so great to have you on the show for the first time. Can't wait to talk more as we get closer and nearer to basketball season. But I know, my man, you got a lot more realignment stuff, and you got a massive football season upcoming as well, with several Big Ten teams, in particular Michigan and Ohio State, right back near the top. Craig Sheeman, thanks so much for joining us. All the rest of you out there, thanks for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen every day. Everydayers, we hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back with you next week. Don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Locked On CBB. You can follow Craig on Twitter, or X, I guess, at Talk Big Ten. You can follow me at Isaac Shade. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on audio and video format, smash the like button, and leave your comments on today's show. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until next week, peace.